I'm going to talk a little bit about mental illness and mental health, and what I think is a more hopeful perspective than, I would say, than the conventional wisdom, or that apparently most Americans believe. We'll talk a little bit about what apparently most Americans believe. You may believe what most Americans believe, or you may not. We'll see. We'll see. So, most Americans believe that mental illnesses are caused by chemical imbalances, brain disorders, and genetic anomalies. About apparently 90% of Americans believe that. And that's a very cynical belief and a very dangerous belief. Well, let me tell you why I think that belief is cynical and harmful, okay? It's cynical because if you really believe that, and by the way, most people don't really believe it, even though they say they believe it. I'll talk a little bit about that too. If you really believe that, you believe that human beings don't have control over the faculty they use to live their lives. If you believe that mental illnesses are caused by chemical imbalances and brain disorders and genetic problems, genetic anomalies, again, I'll say, you believe that human beings don't have control over their minds, their emotions, their intentions, their reactions. They're just driven. Human beings are driven by these biological forces. That's a very cynical belief. That's a harmful belief because if you believe that, you're not likely to enter wholeheartedly into psychotherapy. And I think psychotherapy is far and away the best treatment for mental illness. Now, I have to give you some truth in advertising. I'm a psychotherapist, so, right? So I work as a psychotherapist. I've also been a patient. I first became seriously depressed when I was 25 years old, and over the years I've been to many, many, many therapists. I still have a therapist even today. But, you know, if you believe that, well, it's all biological, you know, why would you go to a therapist? Why would you want to work on yourself in a way, right? And then the third reason that I think that's a harmful belief is that there's not enough scientific evidence to support that belief, that mental illnesses are caused by chemical imbalances, brain disorders, genetics. There's not enough scientific evidence. So, if they aren't caused by that, what are they caused by? What are mental illnesses? Well, I believe that mental illnesses are how people are reacting to their lives. That's what mental illnesses are. They are how people are reacting to their lives and to concerns they have about themselves and their lives. That's what they all are. And they're not any more than that or any less than that. So that includes schizophrenia. You know, schizophrenia or psychosis is the one that certainly most people and probably psychiatrists, all of them believe, well, that's just a brain disorder. Schizophrenia, well, no, I don't think so. Schizophrenia is what happens when a person is so terrified about living in the world with human beings that they create a different world. And they live in a different world, a world that's more in which they can survive. So let me say a little more about this. What do I mean when I say that mental illnesses are how people react to their life situations and concerns they have about themselves and their lives? Well, what I mean is that pretty much most human beings, in order to be healthy, first of all, we have to be able to eat, we have to have enough food, enough shelter, enough safety, basic safety, health care, those fundamental needs, you might call them. You all know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Abraham Maslow. You know, that we have the most basic needs, food, shelter, safety, And if we don't meet those needs, we're really not interested in doing anything else. I mean, those needs are primary. Only when we meet those needs can we begin to get interested in being connected to other people and using our abilities, what he called self-actualization. So once we've met those basic needs, most human beings, in order to be healthy, they need really two things. One, they have to be connected to other people in satisfying ways. In other words, they have to be able to love the way they want to love. And that includes all kinds of love: sexual love, family love, romantic love, colleague love, all kinds of love. And the other thing that human beings need to be able to do in order to be healthy and be able to feel okay is they need to be able to use their abilities in satisfying ways. You know, we have these incredible abilities. We have the ability to make decisions, to understand the world, to create things, to make art, to build things, to dance, sing, swim, ski, play with balls. We have these amazing abilities. And in order to be healthy and feel okay, we have to be able to use them in satisfying ways. And basically, let me give you a little evidence of that. Somebody asked Sigmund Freud when he was in his 80s, Dr. Freud, what is the key to mental health? Sigmund Freud was a man who spent his whole life trying to understand human beings. And you can joke about him and make fun of him, and some of the things he believed were really nuts, but he really understood human beings. So someone asked him, well, what's the key to mental health? He said, the key to mental health is the capacity to love and the capacity to work and the capacity to enjoy life. And a man named Matthew Fox took the word work and said, well, I think it's more than work, it's expressing yourself. So what Freud said was, in order to be healthy, feel okay, human beings have to be able to love the way they want to love, express themselves the way they want to express themselves, and enjoy life. I'm looking at my watch. I'm only going to talk for 20 minutes, and then I'll have you talk among yourself. So the positive psychologists look at happiness, and they ask the question, well, what are the ingredients of happiness? And here's what they come up with. Using the best part of oneself in the interest of something bigger than oneself. Okay? Number one, using the best part of oneself in the interest of something bigger than oneself. Second, positive relationships. And third, achievement, competence, and mastery. It's very similar to what Freud said, right? Positive relationships, achievement, competence, and mastery, using the best part of oneself to contribute to something larger than oneself. So here's the deal. If people can't do that, if they're having real trouble loving the way they want to love and working the way they want to work and expressing themselves the way they want to express themselves, the way they want to, they're going to become agitated, upset, angry, depressed, manic, obsessive compulsive, and psychotic. If people can't live the way they want to live, they will become mentally ill. And so that's what causes mental illness. Well, you can say, okay, well, there's chemistry going on, I understand that. I wouldn't be alive if I didn't have biochemistry going on, or if my brain wasn't functioning, or if my genetics weren't operating. But none of that's important. It's not important. What's important is how I'm living my life. Okay? So let me tell you why I think Americans are confused about this. I did a little survey. And it was very unscientific. I just interviewed 10 people. Some of them are my friends. I asked them, what do you think causes mental illness? They all said, oh, it's something physiological, it's a brain disorder, chemical imbalance, genetic problem. I said, well, what do you think triggered the change in the brain, or the change in chemistry, or the change in genetics? What do you think triggered it? Because they weren't mentally ill, and then they became mentally ill. And they all said, oh, something happened to the person. Something happened. I said, well, wait a second. If you're telling me that what triggered the mental illness was something happened to a person, why are you saying it was caused by chemistry, by biochemistry, brain function, and genetics? You just said it was something happened to the person. They all go like this. Oh, yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. So people were confused about it. Then I asked them the question, do you think there's a difference between how a person is reacting to his or her life situation, to concerns that he or she has about himself or herself and the life? Do you think there's a difference between that and a diagnosable mental illness? And they all said, oh, yeah, there is. That's wrong, folks. That's wrong. There is no evidence for that. There is no way that any scientist, any psychiatrist, any psychologist can tell you the difference between how a person is reacting to his or her life and a mental illness. Now, most Americans believe that there is. They believe there's something about a mental illness that's something different from your life, how you're reacting to your life. So I saw this, basically I saw an article that said young people going in college age, when they start feeling bad, when they start feeling down, agitated, upset, out of control, they don't know if it's just something they're reacting to their life or if they have a mental illness. See, they don't know. And they want to find out. Well, there's no difference between those things. The psychiatrists believe there is. Mainstream psychiatrists say, oh no, there's mental illness, it's all about brain, genetics, and biochemistry. So, so I'm concerned about this. I say, wait a second, if Americans really believe this, about this, they really believe that mental illnesses are chemical imbalances, brain disorders, genetics, they don't understand human beings. They have a fundamental misunderstanding of how human beings operate. And so this is a problem. So let me say just a few more, give you to explain this a little better. So depression, and I'm talking about major depressive disorder. Depression is what happens when a person has lost something very valuable, something precious. It could be a person, but it could also be a sense of certainty, a sense of security, a sense of safety, a sense of adequacy. Any loss, person's going to become major depressive disorder. If a person has deep concerns about his or her life, am I going to be able to live the way I want to live? Am I going to be able to love the way I want to love, work the way I want to work? Am I going to be able to live in this world? Depression. You're going to get depressed. And of course, which is a good thing, because the depression makes you then deal with your life. That's what depression does. Depression is very valuable, because what depression does is make a person go inside. Depression says to a person, hey, stop focusing outside, stop being so happy and extroverted, trying to you need to spend some time with yourself and deal with your life. That's what depression does. Mania happens, bipolar disorder, that happens when a person has had a lot of pressure to be successful and they can't be. And so they have the illusion of being successful and very powerful. That's what mania is. And it's also people, when you're in a manic episode, you don't have to make the kinds of choices and the kinds of decisions that we have to make when you live your life. How are you going to spend your money? What are you going to do today? All these decisions that we have to make every day. Well, when you're in a manic episode, you don't have to do that. You can do everything. You can do anything you want to do. You don't have to deal with those everyday problems. So what I'm saying, and my message, is that this idea. Well, let me say a few more words. Okay, so that's what mania is. Panic attack. Panic attack happens when you're facing a difficult dilemma that is so difficult you don't even want to know what it is. And the panic attack comes, anxiety attack comes, because your body-mind is saying, hey, you have to deal with this. That's what the panic attack is about. Obsessive compulsive disorder is what happens when a person wants to control things, wants to have the illusion of control in a world where the most important things we don't have control over. Things that can really hurt us we don't have control over. So it's obsessive compulsive disorder, people who, go back and lock the door 10 times, go through rituals, counting things in their heads, wash their hands 20 times. That's what happens when people want more control over the world than they can have. They get the illusion of control. And as I said, psychosis happens when a person is so terrified about the world, terrified of the world and human beings, that in order to survive, they have to create their own world. And actually, psychosis is a move towards healing. Now, it's not a move that people make from their rational mind. People who really understand psychosis, and I have to tell you that mainstream psychiatrists don't understand it at all. Mainstream psychiatry is so off on psychosis, it's really horrible. What they do, what mainstream psychiatry is doing today in this country, is a person comes in who's really hurting to see a doctor, who's terrified about the world, who is actually in a move towards healing, and the doctor gives them a drug, tells them they have a brain disorder, they're going to have to take this drug for the rest of their lives, and stops the process of healing that the person is in. So we're hurting these people. They go to a psychiatrist to get help and they get hurt. What could be worse than that? So why is this important? Why is it important? Well, I think it's important because the best treatment for a mental illness is psychotherapy. And when I say psychotherapy, I mean psychotherapy writ large. So I'm including, talking to a therapist, and it's not just talk therapy. If you go to a good therapist, you're going to be working with your body, your emotions, your thoughts, all of that. You're going to put all of that together. Body, we have three sources of information: the body, emotions, thoughts. A good therapist is going to be working with you on helping you get to know yourself so you can manage yourself, you can manage the organism, so you can live the way you want to live. So a good therapist is doing. Helping you develop a good relationship with yourself, getting to know yourself. But it's more than that therapy. It's support groups, it's the expressive therapies, art therapy, music therapy, dance therapy, 12-step groups, exercise, yoga, massage, help with relationships, help with jobs. It's anything that anything that helps a person live their lives the way they want to live it is therapy. But, and I'll say one thing. One of the reasons why you can see the kind of concern I have is that over the last 30 years, there's been a trend towards people who go in to see a doctor with the symptoms of a mental illness. More and more, all they do is get drugs, and they don't get any therapy. Well, drugs are not going to help you learn to live. Drugs are not going to help you learn to use your mind, your emotions, your body, your reactions, your intentions. Drugs aren't going to help you do that. They might help you feel better for a little while. Although I don't know why you'd want to feel good if your life is horrible. I mean, if you're not loving the way you want to love and working the way you want to work and expressing yourself and enjoying, why would you want to feel good? You don't want to feel good, you want to feel bad. So you do something about it. Well, that's what that pamphlet, I don't know, you didn't all get the pamphlet, but I have a pamphlet that, what I mean there, your symptoms are the path to mental health. Your symptoms are telling you, the symptoms are going to tell you what's wrong, what's the problem, what do you need to work on. So the idea of getting rid of symptoms with a drug is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But that's what we're doing in this country. Wow. So what I'd like to do, and tell me if you want to do this or not, tell me how, maybe you can give me some idea. What I'd like you to do is break up into groups of, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can have 3 groups of 4 here. Take the chairs and get into groups of 4 and just discuss among yourselves what you've heard me say for about 10 minutes. You know, we all have parts of ourselves that we really aren't comfortable with. And one of the parts of myself I'm not that comfortable with is I really do love to be the center of attention. I do love it.
But it's for a reason, though. You've got something good to say.
Maybe, hopefully. Well, you know, my therapist always talks about, you know, you have to be careful because our first reaction to most things comes from the ego. And we're very vulnerable to ego attacks. Human beings very vulnerable to ego attacks. And in order to ward off the ego attack, we just have to take time and quiet down and try to find our hearts. Sometimes it's hard to do. So, yeah, I'd like to just hear some of the reactions, see if we can kind of find some richness maybe in this fascinating subject.
Yeah, I find the little bit I've seen of your pamphlet, I saw you online, very compelling. However, there's always a however. I also finished reading a book very recently called Healthy Brain, Happy Life by Wendy Suzuki. I don't know, she's a PhD neuroscientist, runs a big research. I think in her whole book she didn't mention therapists or anything else. She talked about getting your brain healthy. And I also recently looked at Dale Breslin's work. He's at UCLA. He's reversed Parkinson's disease. He also doesn't talk about psychotherapy. So they would say that there are people who have things wrong with their brain, wrong with their body, affects their brain, and that therapy by itself wouldn't cut it. I don't think they would necessarily say that, no, don't ever worry about it. So you just have to get healthier and healthier and you'll be okay. It would seem to me that the therapy would be half of the equation here. But that if you're unhealthy, if you have disease X, eating Twinkies 20 times a day, taking lots of drugs, psychoactive drugs, you're not going to be able, psychotherapy isn't going to cut it. I mean, I'm not sure that my 2 other participants would agree with that particular, but we all agree that somehow the body, something going wrong with the microbiome could affect the brain. But anyway, so you got the idea.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about that because that is a fascinating subject. We're really talking about mind-body dynamics, right?
Okay.
So for sure, there are some purely physiological conditions that could cause a person to be mentally ill. Brain tumors.
Yeah, concussions.
People can go into delirium from fever.
Yeah, okay.
Fever. There are other physiological things that can do this, right? into this. Here's the but, right?
Yeah, okay.
You said however, I'll give it a but. But then there's there's all of this evidence that if you change the way you think, your brain will change. If you change the way you use your mind, your brain will change. I heard someone mention thyroid. You know?
In our group, thyroid came up.
Thyroid. There's a guy named Franz Alexander, who was a psychologist, and he was doing this research 50 years ago. And what he found was that people who had difficult childhoods had thyroid problems. Significant.
Yeah.
People who had difficult childhoods had problems with the thyroid. Now, the thyroid regulates the level of activity, right, to a great extent. So I got to tell you my recent experience. Back in April, I did a series of 5 lectures like this, and when I was getting ready for them, I went to the doctor, and they did the blood test, and it turned out that my thyroid was hyper. I was in a hyperthyroid situation. Well, after that lecture series was done, I went to the doctor, had a blood test, my thyroid was totally normal. I needed to be active. I needed to be very active getting ready for these lectures. So, I don't know, maybe the thyroid is somehow has a connection with the mind, right? So I'll give you a couple of this is research. There's a guy named Jeffrey Schwartz. He's a researcher at UCLA. He had 15 patients, all of them diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, right? So these 15 are all diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. They look at their brains, and they see that all their brains are abnormal in the way their brain is functioning, right? Half of them get drug therapy, SSRIs. The other half get cognitive behavioral therapy, in which they learn how to manage their thoughts. They learn they don't have to pay attention to their thoughts, that they can control their thoughts, and they change their attitude towards their thoughts. So half get the drugs, half get this cognitive behavioral therapy. They all improved, and then when they looked at their brains, all of their brains had changed in the same way. Yeah. See?
What do you mean they changed in the same way?
Exactly. Their brains had all changed in the same way. The
Both
ones who
groups,
had
the
taught
people
their...
who took the SSRIs, their brains changed in the same way as the cognitive behavior therapy?
Yeah.
Now, is
All of their
that-
brains had changed in the same way. So the therapy, helping people change their attitude towards their thoughts and their ability to manage their thoughts, change their brains. Right. So the brain is really plastic. And this is also true if you take dyslexic children and look at their brains are abnormal. And the way they function, you teach them to read, their brains then become normal.
Yeah, there's research on that, I read it.
So it's really complicated. I got to tell you that, okay, so I actually believe this. I don't believe we're going to get much benefit from studying the brain. I don't think we are. We're spending tremendous amounts of money, billions. The National Institute of Mental Health has a budget of $1.3 billion every year. I think about 70% of that's spent on the brain. I don't think we're going to get much benefit from it. I don't see it. What, you can better drugs, electroshock?
But isn't that where thinking occurs? in the
What?
brain? Isn't that where thinking occurs?
No.
Okay.
No, we think with our minds. Now,
Okay.
let me just say that, I'll just say a few words. I don't want to get into this too much, but neuroscientists have no idea about the association between the brain and the mind. Okay? There's a guy named William Udall, who's a neuroscientist, who wrote a book called Mind and Brain, A Critique of Neuroscience. And what he said was, neuroscientists think they have a theory about how the brain creates the mind. They're not even close. The mind is so vastly powerful. The mind is what we use to do everything we do. Everything we do. Build things, create things, solve problems, do mathematics, art, music, connection with other people, sport. The mind is this vastly powerful faculty we have. Neuroscientists have no idea about how the brain and the mind are connected. Very little. Neuroscientists can't tell you what's happening differently in the brain when I'm planning a trip from when I'm reading a book or from when I'm painting a painting. Neuroscientists can't tell you anything about that. They can't tell you what happens when I move my arm at the count of 3. Watch this. 1, 2, 3. A guy named Sir John Eccles wrote a whole book about this. Said, well, they know about neurons, they know about connections, the physiology of the, what would you call it, the afferent, the nerves, and that. What they don't know is how I do it at the count of 3. What happens? And this guy, Sir John Eccles, thinks it's quantum. He thinks it's some kind of quantum dynamic going on. How do I do it at the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. How do I do that? They don't know. The neuroscientists don't know. They don't know. So all this hype about neuroscience, they know very little about the mind. Okay.
And what they do know may not be as powerful as what therapy can do to make it different.
Exactly.
And there is something that you're talking about, we don't know what the mind does. In Parkinson's, there's the basal ganglia, which goes rogue and keeps the person's movements detached from what they think they're trying to do, and they can no longer walk in the right way. But a baby's movements don't go through the basal ganglia. They go from the brain to each muscle group. They have to move the thigh, bend the knee, do each of those things. And the man has devised a way to teach someone with Parkinson's to walk again by paying attention the way a baby pays attention to the legs. So things like that can happen, but that doesn't mean that that's the central and most effective way for us to deal with ourselves.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think that we're going to be more effective, even if you want to change our brains, if we work on our minds. Work on our minds and our emotions. I think there's evidence for that too. Yeah.
There's a lot of kids nowadays, and they all get Ritalin because they're hyper. How do you recommend we're working on that hyperness in children?
Okay, I think that the reason kids get diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is because they're very upset about something that's going on at home or in their lives. They aren't getting what's going on in the classroom. They're bored and uninterested in what's going on. They have other things that they're much more concerned about than what's going on in that classroom. So the question is, why is a child doing what a child does when they get diagnosed with ADHD? Why they're not paying attention? There's all kinds of reasons for that, and one of the problems with the schools is, this is my impression about the schools, they're not willing to change for the kid. Now, some of them may be, but in general, the school they don't want to change their operation to help the kid who's not getting it. They want the kid to change. And so I think that's what's going on. So what was your question? I know it was about Ritalin. So how do you do it? Well,
How do you do it without Ritalin?
Well, what you do is you find out what's going on with this kid, the individual kid. What's going on? What is happening? What's happening at home? What are you scared about, upset about? You're not getting in what's going on here? Maybe, one of the big problems with our education system is that, there's a guy named Howard Gardner who writes about all the different kinds of intelligences there are. So there's spatial intelligence, musical intelligence, spiritual intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence, spiritual, religious intelligence. But our schools only focus on verbal mathematical intelligence, period. That's it. What about this? Oh my God. It's horrible. It's horrible. Schools are here. What's about the poor kid who's over here? You get the idea. And Ritalin is speed. Did you know this? I don't know. Did you know that Ritalin's an amphetamine? Ritalin is actually on the schedule. It's a Schedule II drug in the Drug Enforcement Administration formulary of drugs. It's an illegal drug. It's an illegal drug. It's speed. Anyway, by the way, let me say too, I understand why people take psychiatric drugs, and it's fine with me. If they have information about the drugs and they want to do that, because a lot of people get better. They really get better on the psychiatric drugs. Now, with antidepressants, there's a guy named Irving Kirsch who's looked at all the trials that the drug companies sent to the FDA, and he found that all of the getting better is the placebo effect. And all except for the most severe depression. All of it's the placebo effect. So I've read some of these studies, right? So here's what happens. They'll have a bunch of people all diagnosed with major depressive disorder, and they'll have these treatment groups. One group gets drugs. Another group gets drugs and therapy. Another group gets therapy. Another group gets exercise. Another group gets a sugar pill. Okay. Well, the group that gets a sugar pill, in most cases, 40% of them say they got better. Okay? Just about the same amount that got the pill, got the therapy. Almost very similar. Now, the biggest study that was done on depression found that the group that did the best was the group on regular exercise. It was a Duke University study. The people doing regular exercise did better than the drugs, the therapy, the drugs and therapy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, wow, it's complicated. Anyway, yeah, what else? What else?
Well, you mentioned Gardner's,
Right.
Stanislav Grof. There's a whole slew, even Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, knowledge, instruction, and consciousness. The consciousness studies. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
It's
I'm
there.
listening.
It's just not.
Say more. Say more about it.
But it's all. But no one. These folks here are ignoring.
Oh.
It's all been researched. You just have to implement.
Yeah, the
Rupert
schools.
Sheldrake, morphogenic resonance. Rupert Sheldrake.
Yeah, Rupert Sheldrake, yeah.
If you get one school system starting to shift consciousness, it can spread.
Mm-hmm.
The way birds figured out how to break into milk crates in Britain,
Yeah.
and then it spread to the continent.
Spread to the yeah. This is Rupert Sheldrake, who's a life scientist
Yeah.
who is considered to be a quack, but he has some pretty good evidence. He was just pointing out that, I don't know, the problem with the schools, let me just say it, it's a whole other topic. The most powerful educational resource in the world is the desire of a human being to learn what he or she wants to learn, when they want to learn it, and how they want to learn it. That's the most powerful educational force in the world. You have a human being who wants to learn something really badly, wants to learn it, and the schools don't use that at all. I mean, it's virtually not used. That force is not used in the school system.
Montessori.
Yeah.
Montessori schooling. is
Yeah,
focused on that.
Montessori,
What do you
Waldorf.
want to study?
Have you ever heard of the Sudbury Valley schools? Look up Sudbury Valley School.
How do you spell
Sudbury?
Sudbury?
Sudbury, S-U-D-B-U-R-Y. Sudbury Valley School is a school in Worcester, Mass, where there's no curriculum. And I went to a Sudbury Valley school in Denver. And the headmaster said to me, here's what I tell every teacher. The first rule for every teacher in this school is, you are not allowed to require a student to learn anything. Okay? You're not allowed to require a student to learn anything. It works. Anyway, okay, we got off this topic. I had a lot of, I can talk about politics too. You want to talk about that? I can talk about the problem in the country.
No.
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 Okay.
Please.
Please.
No, when you were talking earlier, I appreciate that you said that people do improve sometimes with psychoactive medication.
Absolutely.
When you were talking initially, and I would like to share, I got a PhD in clinical psychology. I had the most elite education in psychology and clinical psychology that you can have on the planet. And in fact, I want to share a talk. I'm going to do my little talk about my search. I came to Meher Baba through my search in psychology. I searched continuously from the time I was about 10 years old until I was about 23, studied and read psychology. And as I say, had as elite education as you can have. And it was the discourses, the psychology of the discourses that brought me to Meher Baba. It was my search for a psychology book.
You're a real psychologist.
That was it. And he does say in the discourses that the difference between mentally ill people and non-mentally ill people is that non-mentally ill people can basically solve their problems. Well, everybody has problems. Non-mentally ill people can basically solve them, and mentally ill people can't. And that actually leads us, I think, into, and I do want to say that everything I say I have seen with my own eyes. I don't say anything I read in the book. And I'm very, very suspicious of psychological research, period. Because it's very, when I talk about plastic, psychologists find what they are looking for. Believe me. You know,
I agree.
They find it. If they're a cognitive behavior therapist, they will find the glories of cognitive behavior therapy. And if they are if they're working for Merck, they will find the glories of medication. So anyway, but
Absolutely.
I guess one thing I would share from your initial talk, and I had talked about it in my little group, was that there's a difference between depression and grief. You talked about depression happens when you lose something. And actually, there are many paths to the kinds of depletion of brain chemicals, the depletion of whatever you want to call it, serotonin, that leads to depression. And anxiety can lead to depression, to clinical depression. Again, when we have these losses and we're not able to solve the problem, as Baba says, but as far as, you're absolutely right, you cannot learn anything from a pill. I tell my patients that all the time, you cannot learn anything from a pill. You use the word happy, that take the pill and make them happy. I don't know what pill that is, because I've never seen it.
Right.
I
don't think there is.
There are no pills that make anybody happy. But
Gin,
I do think,
maybe gin.
Yeah, briefly. But
Very temporarily.
I do think that there are moments in terms of depression. What I explain to people is the good news about anxiety is you have the use of your rational mind. But once you fall into depression, the power of your rational mind starts to bend, and you perceive the world inaccurately. You perceive it through that depression. And all I can say, and I'm being the devil's advocate here, but there are times when it is necessary to block. I tell people, all that pill is going to do is going to block your feelings. It's going to block your feelings. But there are times when it is necessary to block those feelings so the person can just begin to see things a little bit more clearly, have a little bit more energy to get out of bed, or a little bit more energy to function. There are times when it's necessary to block those feelings. And I'm going to really be the devil's advocate here. I'm not going to speak in favor of Ritalin. I'm not going to speak in favor of that medication. But I'm going to say, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and you've seen it with your own eyes, I believe, that, and I'm going to put the good stuff before the bad. The good stuff is, I bow down to your rebellion. I love it. I like your saying, wait a second, maybe we don't want to be drugged all the time. Maybe we want to, I really appreciate your pushback. If you want to talk about politics, that's what we do as Americans. We push back. And I think it's great. But ADHD, real ADHD, is a brain disorder. It's not because a child, and again, it's not because the child is bored or because the child may be bored because they can't direct their attention. Their brain will not direct the attention. It's not an attention deficit, it's an attention overload, and the brain cannot direct their attention. So, but it's not environmental. It is a brain condition. Anyway, so I think that's, oh, and one other thing I wanted to say, just one other quick one. The reason why psychotherapy works, the only reason why psychotherapy works, why it's so incredibly powerful, is because it contains an element of love. It contains an element of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
That, and this has been researched, and this is actually research that's accurate. If someone feels that you care about them, that experience that there's this one other human being in the world that is safe, it's not going to tell my secrets, and they sincerely care about me, and they're not going to tell me to shut up, or they're not going to tell me I'm wrong, they're not going to judge me, and they really care about me. And that's the healing element in psychotherapy, is love.
Yeah.
So that's my speech.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and the research, they do research on psychotherapy. And what the research shows is exactly what you just said, right? Is that, psychotherapy is effective. Actually, and this is things that people don't know. This is something people don't know. All the studies of psychotherapy, now what they do is they ask the patients whether it was effective. Most of the studies. You can also ask the psychologists, say, did that help this person? If you ask the patients, 80% of them say yes. And the more psychotherapy they receive, the more likely they are to say yes, it was helpful. But it doesn't make any difference what approach the therapist used or what the credentials of the therapist were. It doesn't make cognitive behavioral, Gestalt, psychodynamic, it doesn't make any difference. What makes a difference is the relationship between the therapist and the patient. And I have a friend who's a psychotherapist, and he says, what I'm doing, I'm just simply giving this patient the direct experience of being listened to in a way that he or she has never been listened to before, and hearing a reaction that he or she has never heard before. That's what I'm doing.
And they can learn then to listen to themselves
Oh.
and become their own therapist.
That's the goal. That's the goal. My therapist says, look, our lifelong task is to develop a good relationship with ourselves. This is what our lifelong task is, to develop a good relationship with ourselves. I asked her, well, how do you do that? She said, well, you get to know yourself. You get to know yourself. With all your warts, ridiculousness, stupidity, craziness, wonderfulness, love, greatness, with all the whole deal. As Zorba said in Zorba the Greek, the full catastrophe. you come to love and understand the full catastrophe. And I think I think the best thing I can do for a person as a psychotherapist is help them realize that whatever the symptom is they're coming in with is totally understandable, makes all the sense in the world, and we need to take a look at it and see what that symptom can tell you about your life, what you're concerned about. We need to, and I'll say to people sometimes, you know, if you weren't feeling as bad as you are, I'd be worried about you. Because you'd really be off if you weren't feeling as bad as you are. So, yes, and now let me say about the drugs too. What I want in the way of drugs is for people to get good information. And I'm convinced, although it's very hard to get evidence for this, but I'm convinced that most people who go to a psychiatrist or a doctor do not get good information about the drugs, especially they don't get good information about the side effects, the dangers of them, and especially they don't get good information about the alternative, the benefits and risks, a comparison of the benefits risks of drugs with the benefits and risks of psychotherapy. Because my belief is that the benefit-risk ratio of psychotherapy is so much better than the benefit-risk ratio of drugs that it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. So what I would want is for people to get good information, and then for people to realize, look, you're going to be on this drug just long enough so you can engage in conversation, so you can get out of bed in the morning, and then we're going to work on what really caused, the real cause of what you're going through and the pain that you're suffering, and then we'll work on it, on what really is behind it.
But yeah, it's until we can become free of, you know, the greed component, the profit component in the pharmaceutical industry, which dominates, it would appear to be. But correct me, tell what do you? We don't. That's what's driving the medical schools. That's what's driving the whole process.
Yeah.
Profit
Yeah, it is.
and people's illness. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
not telling them the alternative.
Right.
There's plenty of alternatives that they can't make a profit, so none of those things are recommended.
Right.
Instead of telling them you can do this, 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 and this to develop your emotional intelligence, no, take this drug.
Right.
Everyone is driven by that.
Yeah.
Unless you shift that.
Yeah, that's what's happening. And there's a lot of reasons for what's happened. You know, the increase in the use of psychotropic drugs is dramatic. I mean, it's dramatic. It's like 40 times in the last 20 years. It's the largest selling drug, the drug that makes the most money for the pharmaceutical companies in this country as a class of drugs, is antipsychotic drugs.
Antipsychotic?
Yes, yes, because they get prescribed for all bipolar disorder, a lot of depressive disorder. Abilify, you see the advertisements. If your antidepressant's not working, take Abilify. Bipolar disorder, and kids get diagnosed down to the age of 5 and 4, you know, having tantrums, bipolar disorder. Antipsychotic, now, antipsychotic drugs are really dangerous, folks. These are dangerous. Here's the deal with antipsychotic. Here's what antipsychotic drugs do. They reduce the dopamine in the brain. That's what they do. They reduce the dopamine in the brain. Now, dopamine is a very important neurotransmitter. Dopamine is associated with creativity, with pleasure, with activity, with liveliness. So it's no wonder that if people take these antipsychotic drugs for 2 or 3 years, they get Parkinson's disease. It's called tardive dyskinesia. They get Parkinson's disease. Brain shrinkage, cognitive impairment, early death. People who take antipsychotic drugs die 25 years on average younger than people who don't. Now, the psychiatrist will tell you, well, the reason for that is because they don't get good medical care, because they smoke, because they're obese. Yeah, well, those antipsychotics also do increase the risk of obesity and diabetes. But they're very powerful, very harmful drugs. And you just triggered something in me, because you said that one of the things the antidepressants do is they numb emotions.
They block.
Right? They block emotions. They basically impair emotional processing.
They do.
And even Peter Kramer, who wrote a book on listening to Prozac, he's a psychiatrist. He wrote a book, Listening to Prozac. He said, you know, I noticed that my patients on Prozac lost their conscience.
Wow.
They lost their conscience. They didn't care as much. As if that's just a little thing.
Wow, that explains a lot.
Oh, well, they just lost their conscience. You know? So, well,
really.
there's a black box warning. Let's say one more thing. There's a black box warning on antidepressants, all of them. It says, this drug increases the risk of suicide and violence in people between the ages of 0 and 25, I think. Now, here's the reason why, one of the reasons I think it does that, okay? There have been 5 or 6 people, patients of mine, who said they wanted to kill themselves. And I would ask them, well, what would be the advantage of killing yourself? That's my immediate question. What would be the advantage of killing yourself? Everybody says, well, the pain would be all over. It's all over. I don't have to worry about any of this crap anymore. I'm gone. I'm done. And then I would ask them, what's the disadvantage of killing yourself? And everybody says, it would be horrible for my family and my friends. It would be devastating. Well, if you take away that, which the antidepressant does, it takes away that caring. It makes them more likely to kill themselves. That's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? But you write that in a letter to the editor, to the New York Times, they won't print it. Anyway.
Okay. When I imagine and visualize what I consider to be a good therapist, good counselor, the loving person, the talented person who has enough support for themselves that they can not crumble under the load, because it can be very hard work. I think if we had enough people who were that good, you wouldn't be radical, because it would be known, because we would know people who benefited from this good counseling. So
Yeah.
how do we get more good counseling?
Yeah.
The belief.
That's a good
We
question.
have to believe it, because when, I understand what you were saying, but when I heard you say that they cannot direct their focus, that really struck a nerve with me, because I believed for a long time that my daughter could not, and that is one of my biggest regrets, that when she was young, I allowed myself to believe that she had a learning disability. I allowed myself to believe that she could not focus on things, and I regretted it when I finally started to learn and I started to really focus on empowering her. You can do whatever you want. This is a kid who never was in regular classes. She was always in the classes with the learning disabled people, because I allowed others to influence me and make me believe that my daughter had this problem. She didn't have a problem. Right now, she wears so many hats. She runs circles around people in all that she has been able to learn, all that she is able to do. And all of that only changed when I recognized that she can. So all those years that she did not direct her focus in certain directions, it wasn't because she couldn't. She didn't feel like it.
Right.
She didn't feel like it, and she maybe didn't believe in herself. But I have a hard time now believing that when you say somebody cannot direct their focus, well, how do we know that they can't?
You watch them. A learning, so-called learning disability, which is learning style or whatever, that's the term, learning disability, is different from ADHD, from true ADHD. And I agree that, I'm being the devil's advocate. True ADHD, a brain which has true ADHD is very rare compared to the number of children who are medicated. But, you know, your daughter's learning style is a different thing. And to me, it's when I say cannot, I'm trying to be compassionate, because when you see a child who, again, I'm going to use the word cannot, they are listening to a conversation on the other side of the room, because they cannot listen to the one in front of them, because they hear that one. And when you see that, you feel compassion. And it is out of compassion that I use the word cannot. But I agree with you, because again, I tell my folks, cannot is almost always a fib. I can't do this, I can't stand that, I can't, it's almost always a fib. But it is a different thing than than other, so-called learning disability. Go ahead.
Two things I want to share. One, I saw, I think it was on Facebook, a confession by the psychiatrist who had come up with the diagnosis of ADHD on his deathbed, that he had created that it was a false diagnosis, and he created it under the influence or whatever, the pharmaceutical world. They had kind of conspired with him to create it for their sake. And then the other thing is, I have a friend who teaches piano. She's taught all ages, and she's lived in Italy a long time, and she said that how she deals with children who can't focus, she gives them just a little bit of coffee, and then they can focus. It doesn't have to be a full-fledged drug.
Yeah.
I have a question for you
Yeah.
that came up in our group. People say with therapy, which costs money very often, I don't have the money for that. My insurance doesn't pay for it. I've heard this. I've heard lots of excuses, and I just want to know, when I needed therapy, I realized I spent every last penny on it that I had. I sometimes had one piece of pizza after my coffee and a piece of toast, and one piece of pizza to eat per day, because all my extra money went into, and this is back in the 70s or early 80s, $60 a session back then to go to therapy. But I knew I had to do it, otherwise I'd probably be dead. I know, I just had to. But I hear it again and again, and I just heard it in our group, not about the person themselves, I'll just use the generic term, but about someone in their family. I don't have the money, my insurance doesn't pay for it. What do you say to people? So there's some good therapists out there, and they aren't all, but there are some, but then people say, I don't have the money for it. And I just look at them and I think, well, then you haven't suffered enough. I don't say that. But what do you have to say to people saying I don't have the money?
Yeah, my experience is that all insurances have to include mental health as part of the insurance program, because they passed a law, the Congress passed a law 10 years ago called mental health parity. Mental health parity. So all insurance policies have to cover what they call behavioral health or mental health. My experience is that
What about someone who doesn't have insurance, so eventually answer that?
okay, well, yeah, what I do is I charge people $50 a session if they don't have any insurance and don't have any money. And I also do some pro bono work, but I don't know how many people do that. Most of the people who I see pay $15 copay, 15 or 25, some cases 40 copays. All of the insurances cover mental health. No insurance company has ever questioned me about too many sessions for one of my patients. That's really interesting. And that's also been true of me as a patient. I have never had an insurance company question the number of sessions I was getting from a therapist. And I was getting, when I lived in Colorado, I was seeing a Jungian analyst, Jungian analyst, woo!
Well, they're up there
Why
with their
insurance
fees.
companies don't question how many sessions you're getting?
Why is
Because
that?
you're saving them so much money.
Okay, whatever the
Because
reason.
you're so much cheaper. Your $75 plus copay is so much cheaper than if they went to a neurologist or they went to a medical doctor. So they
Right.
love us because we are so much cheaper than
So
medical
I think it's pretty accessible. I understand why people who go into therapy don't go in. I didn't do it until I was really ill. I mean, I was 25 years old. I was in very bad shape. I thought I had a brain tumor. And I went to my boss and say, boss, I got a brain tumor. I'm going to the Mayo Clinic. I'm quitting. Going to the Mayo Clinic to take care of my brain tumor. I was 25 years old. It's 1965. He told me, no, you stay here. I'm going to send you to see somebody. And he sent me to a classically trained psychoanalyst. I wouldn't have gone if I wasn't desperate. Who's going to go to a therapist? I mean, if I can take a pill or if I can, well, wait a second, I can do this myself. I don't have to, what am I going to do? I have to work. How does therapy work anyway? It's pretty mysterious. You know because you've been through it, but.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, I told this to my group, that people got me into the state, people are gonna get me out of it.
Uh-huh.
Seriously. I now think a little bit, but, you know, and I just didn't want to be sitting on a curb. I didn't want to be, I mean, I don't know, but I just knew I had to do this. And
You had to
I've
do
done tons of therapy throughout my whole life, off and on. And, you know, in the beginning, sometimes I would get so much better compared to what I'd been that I thought, oh, I'm fine. Then, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 years would go by and I thought, oh no.
Just briefly.
I'm still really fucked up, and back I'd go again. I mean, I was very aware, and I, you know, there were just, it was so wild, my childhood, that it was.
How was it helpful to, how do you think therapy was helpful to you? Just-
I would probably be dead. I
Well, what
wouldn't-
actually happened in there, in that room with the?
And
what
I
happened in the
disagree with
relationship?
you, I didn't get that most of those therapists loved me.
Ah.
I did not get that it was love.
Uh-huh.
What I got was that they were paying full attention.
Ah,
And I didn't, and
Why
wait,
were they
wait, wait,
paying
wait, I'm talking, thank you.
I'm curious.
No, I got to be heard,
you heard, yeah.
I got to be heard, which I
Yeah.
hadn't ever been. And I also got drawn out of myself
Huh.
to what would work.
You got drawn
I'm
out of
getting
yourself.
distracted. Natural, but I felt like I knew I couldn't go away. One friend of mine who had that bipolar, who was on
Mhm.
drugs for it, she was brilliant, absolutely brilliant woman my age. She looked at me one day in New York, this was all in Manhattan, and she said, "You're not one of the walking dead." And I have thought about that comment so many times, and I look at people, and I didn't know this for years, how many people were on meds. And I think, because I'm so grateful that I'm alive and creative to the extent that I am.
Right.
But,
The dopamine's working.
but, you know, it's natural, so, but you said some things, and I asked somebody who I know had some depression, if you, and I was depressed for a while, not clinically, I mean, how could I not have been? But people who've been worse than I, how do they get themselves out of it?
For one thing is they mourn, and then the other thing they do, they work on their life. They get help in actually in ruminating and thinking about their lives and beginning to get clear about what they want and what's wrong, what's not there, and get some help in being able to begin to live the way they want to live. It takes time. So part of it is giving the person time, and that kind of support. Yeah. Here's what I'll finish with 2 things. One is that I told you about that. My boss said sent me to a classically trained psychoanalyst, and I went in and. The psychoanalyst says to me, "There's only one rule here. You lie on the couch and you say everything that comes to your mind." I said, "Okay." So I did that. This is 1965. He's behind me. I don't even see him. Doing that for 3 hours, 3 sessions, 4 sessions, I started getting better. And here's what I think happened. What happened was I was spending a tremendous amount of energy hiding what was true about myself from myself, and trying to hide it from everybody else. So in the process of saying everything that came to my mind, and I said everything that came to my mind, I didn't censor anything. I knew, because if I wasn't speaking, he knew I was resisting, and I wanted to be the good patient. So I just unloaded it. So all of this stuff I was ashamed of, afraid of, inadequacies, fear, tremendous fear, wanted to kill my father, didn't think I could satisfy my wife sexually. I hadn't done it. I'd been married I hadn't satisfied her sexually. I didn't for another 7 years until we did sex therapy. All of that just came out in the presence of us as a human being, and he's going, here's all I hear. I'm unloading this stuff. I could have said, I killed my roommate last night. Threw his body in the river. That was profoundly healing to me. Being able to accept what was true. Yeah. Accepting, okay, I think I can live with this ball of shit that I am. I'm in the presence of another human being, and anyway, The other thing I want to say a little bit about, kind of what you were saying about what's going to happen here. What's going to happen, right? Eventually what's going to happen is the general public is going to say, no, I want help. I want help with my life. I want someone to help me live my life. I don't want the drugs. The general public is going to say, no. That's how it's going to happen. It's going to take years and years and years and years and years. So, because there are a lot of forces behind the drugs. There's the cult of science, the belief in science. There's the cult of professionalism. Well, he's a doctor. There's the what are some other forces? Well, of course, there's the drug companies, but there's the cult of science. There's the cult of
People want
professionalism.
an easy answer.
Easy answer.
They don't want to work.
When you said they
Easy
want
answer.
all this
To work.
information,
Companies prefer the drugs.
They prefer the drugs. And here's what happened. Psychiatry, here's what happened. Psychiatry in about 1970, about the 1970s, psychiatry decided to become a laboratory science. It wasn't really a conscious decision in a way, but the whole field said, we're going to become like other doctors, and we're only going to pay attention to what we can see in a laboratory, what we can measure, quantify, see on a brain scan. That's what they did. And when they did that, they turned their back on human nature. They became useless, because you can't study what's important to human beings in a brain scan or in a laboratory. You can't. And so psychiatry became essentially useless to human beings. And mainstream psychiatry, it's going to change. I just wrote an article about a psychiatrist who said, I'm not doing this anymore. This is not what I want to do, prescribe and give people drugs. And he became a natural, he's calling it natural mental health. He works on everything, yoga, mindfulness, meditation. If he uses medication, yes, but much more helping people learn how to use their emotions and their minds and their bodies.
Brennan?
Oh, Peter Bregan.
Peter Bregan, yeah.
Peter Bregan.
Because he wrote that book, which I was really liked, and he said this thing that when he was in school to become a psychologist, they did this experiment where just people who weren't psychologists, they went into a mental ward, and what they did was they just talked to people. And they just sat down and talked to them and connected with them and listened to them, basically. Right. And that they had as much result as any of the psychologists almost. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he did that as a volunteer at Harvard. Yeah, isn't that cool? He and some other students, they went and they just talked to the people in the back wards. Yeah. And he went up and told the head psychiatrist, he said, hey, if you go back there and talk to those people and listen to them, they begin to make sense. And they didn't want to hear that. Head psychiatrists didn't want to hear that. But the beauty of it is that, our society is so alienated, unconnected, and, everybody, watches TV or is on their computer or texting, and they're not really. So just listening to people is a very powerful thing that we can do. I mean, anybody can do that. Oh, yeah. That's a very powerful thing. Thank you very much. And I really appreciate the willingness to share. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
And thank you, Dorothy. Thank you very much.